Last week we saw the introduction of art chapter, and on the last slide of the chapter, we learned to study art, we have to now think about the 5 factors. Do you remember what these are? To study art, we have to consider of 5 factors. So first one is content, and the second one was subject matter, and the third one was context, and the fourth one was visual element, and the last one was principle of design. So in this week, we're gonna see the one of the factor to study art, the visual element. Second. Good afternoon. If you're not using the registered name, then please change your name to check your attendance. So art consists of visual elements. So today we are going to learn visual elements as fundamentals in art. These are lots of terms. There are lots of terms to remember with the examples. And this chapter is very important for the midterm exam. So the visual elements has line, shape and mass, light, texture and pattern, space, color and time and motion. So today we are going to see line, shape and mass, light, texture and pattern, space of the visual elements. So the first visual element we are going to see is line. A line is a path traced by a moving point. And there are 3 primary functions of a line in art. First function is to record the border of form, and the second function is to describe surfaces and shapes. And the third function is to convey direction and motion. So let's see how it works. There are 2 types of line in art. The first one is contour line, which is the perceived line that marks the border of an object in space. And the second one is outline, which is the edge of a shape or figure depicted an actual line drawn or painted on the surface. So let me show you how they are different in visual image. So the left one is contour line and the right one is outline. What's the difference, everyone?
One has an outline.
Mm-hmm. And the other one?
And one is lighter than the other one.
Mm-hmm. Very good. So let's look at the contour line first, the left one. So as you can see, there is no defined line on the circle. However, we can easily recognize it. It's a circle with the shading, right? So that calls contour line. And the other one, the outline. So the right one, we can recognize a circle shape with the defined line. That calls outline. And there is an implied line, which is another word of contour line. An implied line is defined as a line that suggests that the edge of an object or a plane within an object. The line may be broken by intermittent marks. It may be defined by value, color, or texture, or it may not be visual at all. With any implied line, our brain interprets that the line must exist. So that is a powerful tool that any artist can use. So let's see the examples. So the left drawing has defined lines following the apple's outline. There is no defined line on the right apple drawing. However, our eyes can imagine the outline of the apple because of chiaroscuro, which is a value mass drawing skill that calls implied line. And here are another examples of implied lines. So on the left drawing, there is defined line for the road. However, we can imagine there is a road by the vertical lines surrounding the road. Also, let's look at the right image. This is a feather drawing with dots. There are any lines. No, there is no any lines in this feather drawing. However, the dots spread in the feather shapes, so we can imagine there is a feather. That is implied line. And now let's see direction and movement by lines. The direction of a line can convey mood. The first one is a sunset image with a horizontal line, and horizontal lines are calm and quiet in art. And the next one is vertical line. Vertical lines suggest more potential for movement in art. And the last one is a diagonal line. Diagonal lines strongly suggest movement and give more a feeling of vitality to a picture. So let's see the actual example. So this is a Peter Paul Rubens oil painting, The Raising of the Cross. This is a Baroque style painting in 17th century. The Baroque art movement arose after the Renaissance during the age of colonial settlement. And the Baroque art features show motion, emotion, turbulence, grandeur, and contrast. So it looks very dynamic, right? And everyone look at this painting closer. And can you guess which direction of line we can find in this painting? We just saw 3 direction of line, horizontal line, vertical line, and diagonal line. Which lines can you find in this work of art?
All of them?
All of them. But which one is strongly can you find?
I would have to say the
Vertical?
yeah, with him
Yeah.
playing sideways. It's a
The
lot of that
diagonal.
going on.
Huh?
Diagonal.
Diagonal. That's right. It's a diagonal lines. Yes. So in the central panel, we see the dynamic moment when the cross of Christ's crucifixion is being raised to its upright position. And Rubens created a strong diagonal emphasis by placing the base of the cross at the far lower right of the composition and the top of the cross in the upper left, making Christ's body the focal point. Very good. And let's move on to the next visual element, shape and mass. So a shape is a 2-dimensional form and a mass is a 3-dimensional form. Like this. A shape consists of width and height. Each shape within the image occupies an area with identifiable boundaries. And boundaries may be created by line. And a mass, the right one, is a 3-dimensional form that occupies a volume of space. It consists of width, height, and depth. Shapes can be classified into two types: geometric shapes and organic shapes. Geometric shapes are composed of regular lines and curves. However, organic shapes are made up of unpredictable, irregular lines that suggest the natural world. In art, we can divide an image as positive shape and negative shapes to make contrast. Positive shapes are the shape of the actual objects. So in this image, the chair is the positive shape. And the negative shapes are the shapes in between objects, which means the background. And sometimes it calls as figure and ground. The figure is the object part, this, this face profile image, like a positive shapes. And the ground means background, like negative shapes. And like line, there is an implied shape in art. An implied shape is a shape that does not physically exist, but it's suggested through the psychological connection of dots, lines, areas, or their edges. So let me show you an example. So this is the example. So everyone, look at this image. Which shape can you see in the center of the image?
Triangle.
Triangle. Yeah, triangle. That's right. So there was not a physical triangle shape in this image. However, you could recognize it by psychological connection of the edges. Very good. That calls implied shapes. And let's see the actual example. So this is Raphael's painting, the Madonna of the Meadows. Raphael is one of the masters of the Renaissance in 16th century, and this oil painting was produced in 1505 in Venice. And the Madonna of the Meadow exemplifies a religious theme. It depicts Mother Mary with Jesus Christ and John the Baptist. In this painting, Mary is guarding the two children. So as you can see, any shape physically doesn't exist in this painting, right? But it is our eye movement in the grouping of figures, a geometric shape composition, and it was a popular device to provide unity during the Renaissance. So everyone, can you guess which implied shape, in this painting? Which implied shape used in this painting?
Triangle.
Triangle. That's right. It's a triangle. That is implied shape. Very good. And let's move on to the third visual element, light. So light is represented in works of two-dimensional art to define and describe figures and spaces. And by using light, you can make a space and three-dimensional mass on the two-dimensional surface. So like other elements we just learned, light has also implied light. And implied light means modeling mass in two dimensions. An artist use light and shadow to model objects in two-dimensional works, meaning to give them a three-dimensional appearance. And this is a value scale. Value is defined as the relative lightness or darkness of a color. It is an important tool for the designer and artist in the way that it defines form and creates spatial illusions. And contrast of value separates objects in space, and while gradation of value suggests mass and contour of a contiguous surface. So this is an example to show implied light modeling mass drawing by Leonardo da Vinci from the Renaissance. So as you can see, there is no actual light. Any physical light doesn't exist here, but we can feel there is a light in this drawing, right? So that technique is called chiaroscuro. That means light and dark. In other words, it is called a shading technique. It is discovered and perfected by Italian painters during the Renaissance. And with chiaroscuro, artists employ value lights and darks to record contrast of light and shadow in the natural world. Contrasts the model mass for our eyes. And one of the great masters of chiaroscuro was Leonardo da Vinci. And for doing modeling mass, you can use these kind of drawing skills. Hatching with the single direction drawing line, cross hatching with multiple direction drawing lines, or stippling with dots drawing. And sometimes you can make modeling mass with a smudged technique. Let's move on to the fourth visual element, texture and pattern. So these are the actual pattern. The actual pattern is literally tactile, quality we can experience through touch. And there is a visual texture. Visual texture refers to an implied sense of texture that the artist creates through the use of various artistic elements such as line, shading, and color. So let me show you. So this is the example. So this is a painting. However, with the artist's excellent painting technique, we can feel the texture of the image. The wood wall on the background and the little stuff on the shelf, everything looks very realistic. That is called visual texture. And the pattern. Pattern is any decorative repetitive motif or design in abstract ideas. As such, the elements of pattern repeats in a predictable manner. A geometric pattern is a kind of pattern formed of geometric shapes and typically repeated like a wallpaper design. And now let's move on to the fifth visual element, space. Sculpture, architecture, and all other forms with mass exist in three-dimensional space. That is the actual space in which our bodies also stand. These works of art take their character from the ways in which they curved out volumes of space within and around them. And the artist, like a sculptor and an architect, draw a picture plan with implied space before they create actual piece of art. So you can make implied space with the linear perspective technique on the two-dimensional surface. There are three implied space techniques. The first one is linear perspective, and the second one is foreshortening, and the last one is atmospheric perspective. So these implied space are important for today's discussion. So Everyone, please focus on it. So let's see the linear perspective first. Leonardo da Vinci from the Renaissance discovered this technique to show a space on the two-dimensional surface. The left one, this one, the gate view is a one point linear perspective with the vanishing point on the center of the implied space. And this is a good perspective technique for compacting many objects in a limited space. And the next one, the next implied space technique is foreshortening. With foreshortening, artists can make the implied space more dynamic. Foreshortening is a technique used in perspective to create the illusion of an object receding strongly into the distance or background. The illusion is created by the object appearing shorter than it is in reality, making it seem compressed. So it is an excellent way to maximize the depth and the dimension of paintings and drawing. And the third and the last perspective technique by the Renaissance is atmospheric perspective. So it indicates that as an object recedes into the distance relative to the viewer, we see that object with reduced clarity, value, and color saturation. So we are going to see the rest of the visual elements in the next meeting. And as I said, we have a discussion related to the implied space technique. Let me share what it is. So everyone, I need you to go to our Moodle room after this meeting and then go to week 3 and scroll down. You will see a week 3-1 discussion, which is today's discussion. And when you click this, you will see the today's discussion topic. So please answer, which implied space technique did Raphael use in this painting? That's today's discussion. And please, write why you think he used that implied space technique for this painting. That's all.